For Liam, the world was a map drawn in sound and scent. The grand Harrington mansion wasn't a visual spectacle of marble and gold. It was a symphony of creaking floorboards, a tapestry of smells: lemon polish, his father's faint cigar smoke, the sterile scent of the weekly doctor's visits. 5 years ago, a car accident had stolen the light from his 17-year-old eyes, plunging him into a permanent, unyielding darkness. The best neurologists in the country had been unequivocal. The optic nerve damage was severe and irreversible. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrington," they'd told his father, Charles, their voices a practiced blend of sympathy and finality. "We must learn to manage expectations. He will never see again." Charles Harrington, a titan of industry accustomed to buying solutions, had responded by building a gilded cage for his son. The mansion was outfitted with every assistive technology money could procure. But the one thing it lacked was hope. Liam moved through the rooms with a practiced, weary grace, his fingers trailing along specific walls to navigate, his existence reduced to a routine of meals, audiobooks, and the hollow echo of his own footsteps. His father loved him, but his love was a heavy thing, expressed through hired specialists and quiet, helpless despair. The maids came and went. They were usually quiet, efficient ghosts who smelled of bleach and laundry detergent. They tidied his room while he sat in his armchair, their presence marked only by the whisper of a vacuum or the soft clink of glass being dusted. They followed strict instructions not to disturb him. He was a problem to be maintained, not a person to be engaged. Then Anya arrived. Liam knew she was different from the moment she stepped into his room. The other maids moved with a hesitant, almost fearful energy around him. Anya's footsteps were calm and sure. She didn't tiptoe, and she carried a scent with her, not of chemicals, but of something earthy and warm. It was the smell of dried herbs, of cinnamon, and faintly of the sun on soil. It was a smell that belonged to the outside world, a world he could only remember in faded, 5-year-old impressions. "Good morning, Liam," she said. Her voice was low and melodic, not the hushed, nervous tone others used with him. She stated his name as a simple fact, not a delicate subject. He was so startled by the normalcy of it that he just nodded in the direction of her voice. He heard her moving around the room, but it wasn't the frantic, efficient rustling he was used to. She was slower, more deliberate. He heard the gentle snap of fresh linen as she changed his sheets. After a while, she spoke again, her voice closer now. "The gardenias outside your window are blooming. Their scent is so heavy, it's like a physical presence in the air." No one described the world to him anymore. They assumed it was a cruelty to remind him of what he couldn't see. But Anya's description wasn't pitying. It was an observation, an offering. It was the first thread of connection he'd felt in years. A few days later, she was cleaning near his chair. He heard her pause. "The tension in your shoulders could crack stone," she said, her tone matter-of-fact. "The body holds grief in its muscles. Would you permit me? My grandmother taught me a way to ease it. It was an outrageous request. A maid offering to, what, massage him?" Yet her voice held no subterfuge, only a simple, confident kindness. Against every instinct bred by 5 years of isolation, Liam, starved for any genuine human contact, gave a slight, hesitant nod. Her hands were warm and strong. They didn't flutter or hesitate. They settled on his shoulders with a certainty that bypassed his usual defensive stiffness. As her fingers worked the knotted muscles in his neck, she didn't speak of his blindness or his father. She spoke of the rain from the night before and how it made the city smell clean. And as she worked, her thumb gently, almost accidentally, brushed the tense skin just below his eye. A jolt, strange and electric, shot through him. It wasn't pain. It was a sensation he hadn't felt since the accident, a faint, phantom flicker of something. It was gone as quickly as it came. But in that moment, Liam knew something the doctors didn't. This woman was different. And the darkness around him felt, for the first time, not quite so absolute. The brief, electric sensation below his eye became a secret seed of hope, planted deep within Liam's darkness. It was a fragile, terrifying thing. For 5 years, his reality had been a fixed, grim certainty. Now, Anya had introduced a variable, a question mark where there had only been a period. Their interactions became the quiet center of his existence. Under the guise of tidying up, She would spend a few minutes each day at his chair. She would talk softly about the world outside his window, the colors of the sunset, the shape of the clouds, the brazen squirrel that stole birdseed from the feeder. And then her hands would come to rest on his shoulders, his neck, his temples. She called it just helping the circulation, but it was more than that. Her touch was a language. With each session, the strange sensations around his eyes intensified. It wasn't sight. It was something more primitive. A feeling of pressure being lifted. A faint, warm tingling, like pins and needles but without the pain, as if a numb part of his body was slowly waking up. He began to dread the days she had off, sinking back into the hollow silence of the mansion, the darkness feeling heavier and more profound in her absence. He started asking questions. What did your grandmother do? Was she a doctor? Anya's voice was calm. No, she was a wise woman. Where I'm from, in the Caribbean, they called her a healer. She knew things about plants and the body that, well, they are not always in the doctor's books. Liam sensed a hesitation in her, a caution. She was sharing a part of herself that she knew the world, a world like his father's, would ridicule. This secret knowledge, passed down through generations, was being entrusted to him in the dark. It forged a bond between them that was deeper than any he had with the parade of medical experts. The struggle was internal and immense. Every flicker of sensation was followed by a crushing wave of doubt. You're imagining it, a voice inside him whispered, the voice of 5 years of learned helplessness. You're so desperate for a change that you're inventing feelings. The doctors were clear, never. He was terrified to hope. Hope was a dangerous currency in his world. It always led to bankruptcy. The external conflict arrived inevitably. Charles Harrington, while distant, was not unobservant. He noticed a change in his son. Liam was less sullen, more present. He heard him humming one afternoon, a sound so foreign it stopped Charles in his tracks. He also noticed the amount of time the new maid, Anya, spent in his son's room. His suspicion, fueled by a lifetime of fearing exploitation, grew. He confronted them one afternoon, walking in without warning as Anya's hands were gently massaging Liam's temples. What is going on in here? Charles's voice was like a whip crack, shattering the quiet calm. Liam flinched. Anya's hands stilled but did not jerk away. She turned calmly. I am helping to ease his tension, Mr. Harrington. Helping? Charles's voice dripped with disdain. I employ specialists for that. Your job is to clean. He turned his anger on Liam. Liam, what is this? What has she been telling you? The hope that had felt so warm now felt like a vulnerability, exposed and ridiculed. She's just helping, Father, Liam stammered. Charles's eyes fell on the small clay jar of herbal salve Anya sometimes used, a gift from her grandmother. He picked it up, sniffed it with a grimace. What is this? Some kind of voodoo potion? The word was a weapon meant to belittle. It is a salve of arnica and comfrey, sir. For inflammation, Anya said, her voice steady, though Liam could hear the hurt beneath it. I will not have my son subjected to this. This superstition, Charles boomed. The doctors were explicit. There is no cure. There is only acceptance. Filling his head with false hope is cruel. He pointed a finger at Anya. You are fired. Collect your things and leave. The words landed on Liam like a physical blow. The darkness, which had begun to feel less empty, rushed back in with suffocating force. The struggle was no longer internal. It was here in the room. It was a battle between his father's world of cold, hard facts and the fragile, warm, impossible hope that Anya represented. To side with her was to betray his father, to embrace what seemed like madness. To side with his father was to condemn himself to the darkness forever. In the terrible silence, Liam made his choice. No, Liam said, his voice quiet but firm. It was the first time he had directly defied his father in years. Charles was stunned. What did you say? I said no. Liam turned his head, blind eyes aiming in the direction of his father's voice. She stays. What she is doing. It's working. I can feel it. Feel what? Charles exploded. There is nothing to feel. It's a trick of the mind. Then let it be a trick. Liam shouted, his own anger surfacing. What harm is it doing? The doctors gave me nothing. She gives me something. And I want it. The ultimatum hung in the air. Father and son, separated by an abyss of belief. The struggle had reached its peak. The future, and any chance of light, depended on who would yield. The standoff that followed was cold and silent. Charles Harrington did not fire Anya, but the mansion became a battlefield of tension. He retreated into a furious silence while Liam clung to the fragile routine with Anya as his only lifeline. The sessions continued, but now they were conducted under a pall of disapproval. The hopeful sensations around Liam's eyes persisted, growing slightly stronger, but they were now a source of anxiety as much as hope. He felt the weight of his father's skepticism like a physical pressure, threatening to crush the delicate progress. The turning point arrived not with a whisper, but with a scream. A week after the confrontation, a searing ice-pick headache erupted behind Liam's eyes. It was a common enough occurrence, a remnant of his old injuries, but this one was different in its intensity. He crumpled to the floor of his bedroom, crying out in agony. The world dissolved into a vortex of pain and nausea. The hired nurse was summoned, but the strong painkillers she administered did nothing. Charles paced outside his son's room, his face ashen, listening to Liam's muffled moans. The cold, hard facts of modern medicine were failing. "There's nothing more I can do," the nurse said, her voice full of helpless sympathy. "We have to wait for it to pass. He can't endure this." Charles roared, his composure shattered. The sight of his son in unbearable pain and the impotence of the solutions he had invested so much faith in broke through his rigid worldview. Desperation clawed at him. He remembered Anya's calm certainty, her unshakable confidence. It was madness, but it was the only card left to play. He found her in the kitchen, preparing a tea she said might help. "Anya," he said, his voice stripped of its usual authority, ragged with fear. Your grandmother's ways. Can they help this?" Anya looked at him, not with triumph, but with compassion. She saw a father, not a millionaire. "The pain is a fire in his head. I can try to cool the flames, but you must let me work, without—" Interruption. It was a condition, a test. Charles Harrington, a man who commanded boardrooms, nodded meekly. "Do it, please." In Liam's dark room, the air thick with pain, Anya went to work. She didn't rush. She lit a single candle, filling the room with the faint scent of beeswax. She murmured words in a soft, melodic language that Liam didn't understand. A prayer, a chant, a focusing of intention. She warmed a new salve between her hands, this one smelling sharply of mint and something else, cool and earthy. "This will feel cold, Liam," she whispered. "Let it draw out the heat." Her touch was, as always, sure and gentle. She applied the salve to his temples, his forehead, and with the most delicate of pressures just below his closed eyelids. The cold was a shock, but an immediate relief, like aloe on a burn. She began to massage his head again, her fingers moving in slow, deliberate circles. She hummed the same melody she sometimes hummed while cleaning. Liam felt the searing pain begin to recede, not all at once, but like a tide slowly pulling back from the shore. The unbearable pressure in his skull lessened, but then something else happened. As her thumb passed over his left eyelid, the world exploded, not in light, not in images, but in color, a brilliant, shocking, impossible flash of deep sapphire blue. It lasted less than a second, an abstract, formless wave of pure color that flooded his darkness and then vanished, leaving him gasping. "What? What was that?" he choked out, his voice trembling violently. "What did you see, Liam?" Anya asked, her voice calm but intense. "I didn't see—" "It was blue. A flash of blue!" Anya's hands did not stop their work. The body remembers what the mind forgets. The eyes are connected to the soul. We are waking it up. Charles, who had been watching from the doorway, his heart pounding, saw the change on his son's face. He saw the shock, the awe, the dawning of something that transcended pain relief. He heard Liam's desperate, hopeful question. He didn't understand what was happening. It defied every law of science he knew. But he could not deny the evidence before him. His son, who had been writhing in agony minutes before, was now lying still, his face transformed by wonder. The impossible had happened, and the maid, the woman he had dismissed as a superstitious fool, had made it happen. The turning point was not just for Liam. It was for Charles. The foundation of his entire world had just been cracked open by a flash of sapphire blue in his blind son's eyes. The days following the migraine were different. The tension in the Harrington mansion had been replaced by a fragile, awe-filled silence. Charles Harrington was a man transformed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hesitant, respectful humility around Anya. He no longer saw a maid. He saw a miracle worker. He gave her whatever she asked for, specific herbs, privacy, time with his son. The struggle for control was over. Hope had won. For Liam, the world was becoming a strange and terrifyingly beautiful place. The absolute blackness was gone. It was now a shifting canvas of shadows and light. At first it was disorienting. He would close his eyes and see the same thing as when they were open, a murky grayness. Then the colors returned. They came as sudden, fleeting explosions, a burst of gold that might be a lamp, a smear of green from the garden outside his window. There were no shapes, no edges. It was like looking through a kaleidoscope filled with smoke. He spent hours with Anya, not just receiving her treatments, but now desperately trying to describe the chaotic signals his brain was receiving. "It's like noise," he told her, frustration edging his voice. "Loud, confusing noise. Your mind has forgotten how to see," she explained patiently. "It is like a muscle that has not been used for many years. It is weak. We must be patient. It must learn again." She began to help him. As she massaged his eyes, she would describe the objects in the room in simple terms. "This is a square," she would say, tracing the shape of a picture frame with his fingers. "This is the curve of a circle," guiding his hand around the base of a lamp. She was teaching him to see, not just with his eyes, but with his mind. The breakthrough came on a rainy afternoon. The gray light from the window was softer, less harsh. Liam was sitting in his chair, and Anya was sitting opposite him, her face a blur of light and shadow. He focused, straining until his head ached, trying to make sense of the forms. And then, like a lens suddenly snapping into focus, the shadows coalesced. He saw her face, not perfectly. It was hazy, as if seen through a steamy window. But he saw the dark warmth of her skin, the kind curve of her smile, the deep, compassionate pools of her eyes. She was more beautiful than anything his 5-year-old memories had held. "I see you," he whispered, the words catching in his throat. A tear, his first tear linked to a visual image in half a decade, traced a hot path down his cheek. Anya smiled, her own eyes glistening. "I know," she said softly. From that moment, his sight returned in a rushing tide. His brain, once retaught the basics, began to interpret the world with increasing speed and clarity. He saw the rich grain of the wood on his floor, the intricate pattern of the Persian rug. He saw the worried, lined face of his father, who would now stand in the doorway, watching him with an expression of such profound love and regret that it made Liam's heart ache. The day he walked to the window and saw the garden, the vibrant red of the roses, the deep green of the grass, the impossible blue of the sky, he wept uncontrollably. It was all too much. The world was an overwhelming symphony of color and form. He had to learn to filter it, to process it without becoming dizzy. Anya was his guide, his anchor in the sensory storm. One evening, as the setting sun painted his room in shades of orange and gold, he asked her the question that had been burning in him. "How? The doctor said it was impossible." Anya sat beside him. "The doctors look at the nerve like a wire," she said. "If the wire is cut, they say no signal can pass." My grandmother looked at the body differently. She believed that life, the spirit, has its own energy, that a trauma can shock the system, make it shut down. The nerve was not dead, Liam. It was sleeping, a deep, deep sleep. The medicines, the massages, they were not magic. They were a wake-up call, a persistent knocking at a very deep door. It was an explanation that would never be found in a medical journal, but for Liam, it was the only one that made sense. It wasn't a contradiction of science, but an expansion of it into a realm science was hesitant to tread. The doctors knew everything about the machine of the body, but Anya and her grandmother before her knew about the ghost within it. Learning to see again was a second birth. The world was a constant source of wonder and, at times, overwhelming stimulation for Liam. A simple walk in the garden could leave him breathless, his brain struggling to process the infinite shades of green, the intricate architecture of a leaf, the dizzying flight of a bird. Anya remained his steadfast guide. She taught him to paint, to translate the overwhelming flood of visual information into something he could control on a canvas. It became his therapy, his way of making peace with the miracle he had been granted. He was no longer the blind boy in the gilded cage. He was an artist, rediscovering the universe. Charles Harrington's transformation was just as profound. The man who had once valued only measurable financial success now found his greatest joy in watching his son squint at the sunset or laugh at the comical waddle of a duck on the pond. He paid Anya a sum of money that would have set her family up for generations, but he knew it was an inadequate gesture. The real payment was the respect and gratitude he showed her every day. She was no longer an employee. She was family. A quiet, unshakable bond had formed between the three of them, forged in the fires of despair and tempered by a shared, miraculous hope. Liam often thought about the chasm between the world of his father and the world of Anya. The doctors had not been evil or incompetent. They had simply reached the limit of their knowledge. There never was a boundary drawn by the maps they had. Anya's grandmother, and Anya herself, came from a tradition that recognized there were territories beyond those maps. It wasn't that one was right and the other was wrong. It was that true healing required the courage to acknowledge that both could be true. The lesson was one of humility. On the anniversary of the day he first saw Anya's face, Liam presented her with a gift. It was a painting he had worked on for months. It was a portrait of her, but not as she appeared now. It was a portrait of her spirit as he had first come to know it, in the dark. The background was a deep, velvety black, but from the darkness emerged her face, composed of swirling, vibrant colors, the earthy brown of soil, the green of healing plants, the warm gold of sunlight, and the brilliant sapphire blue of that first impossible flash. It was a picture of the healer, seen through the eyes of the healed. Anya looked at the painting, and for the first time since Liam had known her, she was speechless. Tears filled her eyes. She saw not just her likeness, but her grandmother's legacy, her own worth, reflected back at her with stunning clarity. The story of the millionaire's blind son had a happy ending, but the real story was quieter, deeper. It was a story about the arrogance of certainty and the power of humble wisdom. The doctors had said he would never see, and they were right, from within the walls of their understanding. But Anya knew something they didn't. She knew that impossible is often just a word for a door we haven't found the key to yet. She knew that the body's will to heal can be summoned by something as simple as a compassionate touch and a belief in miracles. Liam's sight was restored, but the greater gift was the lesson they all learned. That the most profound truths are not always written in textbooks, but are often passed down in whispers, in the scent of herbs, and in the unwavering light of a kindness that can illuminate even the deepest darkness.